Okay, so here we are. For students in the 11U course, you're going to find that this is in section 5.1 in your textbook. So it's in the part of the textbook that we're working on right now. I just cropped this piece out because I thought it listed it pretty nicely. There's this thing called, we've been talking about our primary trigonometric ratios. Our primary trigonometric ratios are sine, cos, and tan. These are the reciprocal trigonometric ratios. And guaranteed, when we talk about these, I think your first reaction is probably going to be like, why do these even exist? And they're just basically an extension of sine, cos, and tan to give this a little more nuance. So the reciprocal trigonometric ratios are reciprocals of the primary trigonometric ratios and are defined as 1 divided by each of the primary trigonometric ratios. So what does that mean? So we've got these three things. I'm going to write the names for them on here. The first one is written as CSC. CSC, and what that stands for is cosecant. So just like sine, cos, and tan, there's a new one called cosecant. And then there's one that is SEC, and that stands for secant. And then there's one that is COT, and it's not a nice cot to sleep on, it is cotangent. Cotangent, I did not spell that correctly. Let me take another crack at that. Okay, so these are just three more random names, just as random as sine, cos, and tan. Some mathematicians somewhere came up with them and they stuck, and they were not designed to be nice, friendly names for grade 11 students, but that's where we're at. The whole world, this is what they use, so that's what we're going to use too, so we can talk to other people. So cosecant just means you're going to take sine and put a 1 over top of it. So 1 over sine theta, whatever that is, we say that's equal to cosecant. Basically, it's flipped. It's flipped. So that means instead of opposite over hypotenuse, like sine is, cosecant is going to be hypotenuse over opposite. So think about it just as sine that's been flipped, right? It's the reciprocal, which means it's been flipped. Secant is just like cosine. It's adjacent and hypotenuse, but it's flipped. So secant means we're dividing the hypotenuse side by the adjacent side. And cotangent is just like tangent, but it's flipped. It means we're dividing the adjacent side by the opposite side. So these ones, the easiest way I've found to remember them is just you have to remember which one goes with which. That cosecant goes with sine, that secant goes with cosine, and cotangent goes with tangent. Cotangent's pretty easy to remember because it has tangent in the name. Secant and cosecant are kind of hard to remember because they don't seem to match up with sine and cosine that well. So this is one of those things I think you're just going to have to write yourself a little note or just remember it if you're one of those people that can just kind of drill it into your brain and remember it. So basically all we have to do is take our sine, cos, or tan ratio and flip it, and then we've got this other way of expressing it. So this is again in your textbook, but I would recommend writing yourself a little reminder so that you remember which is which whenever you're doing this. Whenever I teach this course, I have to remind myself secant and cosecant, which is which. I never have them memorized either, so I just have to look it up whenever I'm teaching this course again to remind myself. I'm going to show you how these are used. We're going to try just a couple little practice problems here to give them a shot. So our first one is you'll see sine of 34. Well, we've been doing stuff like that already. That's not that hard. So we're just going to go to our calculator and we'll say sine of 34, and we get a nice little ratio, and that's going to be 0.5592 if we round it off to 4 decimal places, which is how we always want to do those ratios. Easy. We already know how to do that. No problem. Now cosecant 42 degrees, a little different. What this really means, we say first of all, cosecant goes with what? Cosecant goes with sine. Cosecant goes with sine. We have to flip back to our little chart here to remind ourselves. So it's the inverse of sine. So what I can do is I can actually write this as 1 over sine of 42 degrees. Okay? So now I'm going to need to do the math. I'm going to go 1 divided by, now you could just type this in, 1 divided by sine of 42 degrees. Your calculator will handle that. I'm actually just going to put it in a decimal form just to make sure it's kind of exactly clear what I'm doing. So sine of 42 degrees is 0.6691. So 1 divided by 0.6691. So I'm going to put that into my calculator. And I'm going to end up with 1.4945 when I round it off. So you say, what's this number? Well, this is just another ratio. This is dividing some sides. So cosecant, if I flip back here, cosecant is the hypotenuse of the triangle divided by the opposite side. I know the hypotenuse is always the biggest side. So it actually makes sense that if I have the hypotenuse on top of the fraction, somehow I got rid of my next button. There we go. So if I have the hypotenuse on top of the fraction, I should get a number bigger than 1 because the hypotenuse is the bigger side. So that's my ratio of my hypotenuse divided by the opposite side on the triangle. I get that number. Okay, so that's how I would do cosecant. Let's go to C here. We're doing cosine theta equals 4 over 5. So, okay. We could write this as, I can't really work down the page, so I'm just going to write it next to it. Cos theta. 4 over 5, if I put that in my calculator, is 0.8. 4 over 5 is 0.8. So that means theta is going to be equal to the cosine inverse of 0.8. So that's going to be an angle. I'm going to have to do that in my calculator. Cosine inverse of 0.8 looks like 37 degrees is the nearest degree. So we've already been doing that. Hopefully that feels mostly comfortable. Now we've got cotangent theta is 7 over 6. Cotangent theta. Well, cotangent is just tangent flipped, right? It's tangent flipped. If I go back to my previous page, I see that cotangent is 1 over tangent, or it's my adjacent over my opposite side. So that means this is my adjacent side over my opposite side. My adjacent is 7 and my opposite is 6. So if I just flip that, I should get back to tangent. So let's do that. I'm going to turn this to tangent theta, and I'm going to flip my ratio. It's now going to be 6 over 7. So by flipping it, I turn it into tangent because it's the reciprocal. It's flipped. So if I want to find that angle, and the reason I did that is because I don't have a cotangent button on my calculator. If you look on your calculator, if you have a cotangent button, great. But I don't have a cotangent button on this beast. So I'm guessing that you don't either. So we have to turn it into tangent, or we don't have a button for it on our calculator. Some calculators would have that button, but they're pretty rare. So we'll say, okay, our angle is the tan inverse of 6 over 7. So that I can do on my calculator by going inverse tangent of 6 divided by 7, whatever that works out to as a decimal. And I'm going to end up with 41 degrees. So that's cosecant, secant, and cotangent. They're just 3 extra names. They don't add really any new math. They're just the ratios we already knew but flipped. Okay? So in the 11U course, you are going to see quite a bit of this. So I wanted to introduce this to you, and we're going to work with some of the basic trig, but you're going to see this stuff popping up a lot in these questions. Okay? So I'm going to stop sharing that screen for a minute.